Hello, following up on my previous video, we're going to go through a text analytics demo that will allow us to get some insights on customer feedback for Pizzeria, detect the sentiment on their comments, and extract key topics, see how they correlate, sentiment correlates with sales, and so on. So this is the report we're going to create. Let me note that being an Office Line employee, Office Line is a gold partner of Microsoft in Greece. I have a note that the views I present here are not necessarily the perspectives of neither the company or Microsoft. So I have created a GitHub repo with all the material necessary to follow this series of demo videos. And what we're going to do now is to create this report from the data ready file, which has the data set already prepared. So we have done some work using Spark notebooks in Synapse to translate the original comments. And as you can see, most of them are in Greek, and we translated them into English using a cognitive service, and detected the sentiment of these comments using another cognitive service. And then I loaded this data set, this piece of the data set into Power BI, and detected key phrases calling a relevant cognitive service from Power BI Pro. So there was some code involved, and the sentiment score is very simple. It's -1 when the sentiment is negative, 1 when it is positive, and 0 when it is neutral. So having this data set in place, we have two fact tables, two dimension tables. We also connect the fact tables with dimensions. And an interesting point here is that the sentiment score should also be set to aggregate as average, not sum, like, for example, the sales revenue. So having these models in place, we can start creating our report. So the first step is to insert a shape, a rectangle, which will be the top bar. Then I insert an image. All these images are in the repo. And then a text box. The font will be a little bit bigger. It will also be white, while the background will have the same color as our rectangle. Then the next step is to insert a slicer. And I'm going to have the products in there. The slicer should be horizontal. It shouldn't have a slicer header. And we can set the colors, the font color a bit white. The background of the buttons could be a little bit darker than the say color. This. While the background of the entire slicer should have the same color as the rectangle. The next step is to insert a pie chart. And this pie chart will have the products and the sales revenue. We can format the various elements of this pie chart, like the legend, whether the data value should be inside the pie chart or whether we should have percentages or not, and so on. That's easy. I won't go further on this. So the next step is to insert a line and cluster column chart, which will show both the sales and the sentiment score. So I'm going to have the date dimension, the date actually in the shared axis, and I'm going to have the date, not the date hierarchy. I'm going to have the revenue on the line values, and I'm going to have the sentiment score on the column values. The next step is to insert 3 buttons with the faces. Initially, I'm going to insert a blank button, and then I'm going to change its icon to be a custom icon. I'm going to browse and select the happy face. That's it. And copy paste is the easiest way to do it, and change the icon to the neutral face icon. And the same for the negative face. Yeah, happy face. And I'm going to show the buttons and the actions on the buttons later. So the next thing I'm going to do is to include the percentages here of how many comments had a positive sentiment or a negative sentiment, or a neutral sentiment or a negative sentiment. So in order to do that, I need to create some measures. I'm going to create a new measure for the positive percentage. And I'm gonna start with the denominator, which is the total number of rows in the table, subject to the filters that the user have already selected. So I'm going to count the rows of the ultimate mockup table. And I'm going to insert a card in order to have some visibility here. So we have 22 records in total. And I'm going to change it to calculate the numerator, which is going to be the number of records that also have a positive sentiment. So I'm going to use a filter. The sentiment should be positive. And I indeed have 10 records with positive sentiment in the table. So I want to divide the two. And given that when there are no records in the current filter context, I'm going to have blank written in text here. So I am going to also add an if is blank condition to have a 0 instead of a blank. So if our calculation is blank, then I want a 0. Otherwise, I want this calculation. Now, as you probably have noticed, this is formatted as a whole number. So I'm going to change the formatting of the measure in the model view. I'm going to set it as a percentage. And I don't want the small places. So 45%, I don't need the header as well, category label. And I'm also going to change the color of the callout value. Pasting for simplicity. So now I'm going to create two more measures, one for the neutral case and another one for the negative case, and add them into two cards. The easiest way to do it is just copy paste the positive measure and change the filters. Here I'm going to have the neutral measure and change the color. And also change the formatting to percentage of both the negative without decimal places, both the negative and the neutral. So the next two steps are to create the word cloud and the table with the comments. So in order to create the word cloud, I first have to download the image within Power BI desktop. So get more visuals and search for word cloud. And I'm gonna have key phrases. I don't want to rotate the text. And that's it for the word cloud. And I also add a table which can show either the original text, some commentary in Greek, or the translated text. And I'm gonna rename the column for this visual to as you can see, when I click the various elements of the report, it filters the other graphs as well. It highlights them instead of filtering them and constraining the scope of the other graphs given the filters that I selected in the previous one. That's what I prefer to do, so I'm going to edit the interactions. And having selected, for example, the pie chart, I'm going to say that I wanted to filter all the other graphs. The same for the other ones. So now when I click, it just show me the graph for the pizzas or the sandwiches. And of course, when I click the word cloud, it shows me the comments that have pizza as a key topic or club. So the last thing to do is to allocate the actions to these buttons so the user can click the unhappy face and filter the entire report to show only the unhappy comment, given also the other filters that they have selected. So in order to do that, I'm going to add some bookmarks, but first I'm going to unselect the interactions and also insert a slicer that I'm going to do. I have to first click somewhere, unselect everything, and then insert the slicer, new slicer. And what I'm going to have in the slicer is the sentiment. So negative, neutral, and positive. And I'm going to use this slicer to define the bookmarks. This is like a helper slicer. I'm going to hide it at the end. So I think it's the format view, the view. Menu. So I'm adding the first bookmark. Having selected the slicer and in particular the positives, I am unselecting current page, I'm unselecting display, I'm selecting selected visuals, so I have data and selected visuals ticked. I have already selected the slicer, so the selected visuals are the slicer, and in the slicer I have selected the filter that I want to apply when I activate the bookmark. So I update the bookmark to get these settings, and I add two more bookmarks for the neutrals and negatives. I'm selecting neutral here. Sorry. Neutral. Data and selected visuals are selected, and update. And I also want to have a button that will reset the selections and undo the filters that the user applied when they clicked either of these faces, so they can easily revert to the original state. So I'm going to add an everything bookmark. I'm not selecting anything here, so by default everything is selected. I'll click at the correct spot. Try again. So I have everything selected. I have selected the slicer, data and selected visuals, and I update the everything bookmark. So I can now insert a button to revert the filters. So now I have to assign the actions to the buttons. Select a bookmark action, and in the positive button I want the positive bookmark. In the neutral button I want the neutral bookmark. In the happy face button I want the negative bookmark. And in the reset button, I want the everything bookmark. The last step is to hide the slicer, so the easiest way is just to put it somewhere where you can send it back and it will be invisible. And that's it. Unless you can select here to filter and show the data only for pizzas, or the slicer for hamburgers, and revert this. Or focus on the comments which involve potatoes, and so on and so forth. And when you upload it to the service, you're also going to have a reset all filters here to go back to the initial state. So thank you very much. Next, in other videos, we're going to go through the Synapse Spark notebooks. So calling cognitive services to translate and detect the sentiment, and the Power BI dataset creation. So read the output of the Synapse notebook, a Parquet file, and call the key phrase extraction service to extract the key phrases to then create the word cloud.